A woman in a gray sweater now holds one of the Vatican's most powerful roles. Has the Church just crossed a line it can never uncross? The news didn't break with the grandeur of a papal encyclical or the drama of a televised address. It was a whisper, a fleeting headline, a few words slipped into a Vatican press bulletin that landed like a silent earthquake in the ancient halls of the Holy See. Pope Leo XIV, barely a month into his papacy, made his first curial appointment a move so understated it could have been buried in the daily churn of church news, yet so audacious it set the Catholic world ablaze. Within minutes, Catholic Twitter erupted, hashtags multiplied like sparks, and hushed conversations in Vatican corridors swelled into open debate. This wasn't just about a name or a title. It was about what it meant, a shift not only in protocol, but in the very architecture of the Church's power, a signal that something fundamental had changed. The appointee was Sister Titiana Malleti, a Franciscan sister of the poor, named Secretary of the Dicastery for Institutes of Consecrated Life and Societies of Apostolic Life, the second highest role in a Vatican department that shapes the spiritual and disciplinary framework of religious life worldwide. A woman in a position that for centuries had been the domain of men, often cardinals cloaked in the weight of tradition and ecclesiastical rank. No habit, no press conference, no flourish, just a name in a press release. Yet that name carried a gravity that ignited a firestorm. To some, it was a beacon of hope, a bold step toward inclusion, balance, and a church that finally sees its women. To others, it was a fracture in the foundation, a dangerous echo of Francis 2.0, or worse, a prelude to doctrinal drift. One viral tweet captured the fear in stark terms. A nun in charge of vocations? What's next? Women priests? Hundreds of replies followed, a chaotic mix of applause, outrage, and everything in between, as Catholics worldwide grappled with a single, piercing question. What does this mean for the Church? Pope Leo, known in his cardinal days as Robert Prevost, a priest of quiet humility, global ministry, and a theological mind forged in the dusty missions of northern Peru and the urban parishes of Chicago, was expected to ease into his papacy with caution. Many predicted a pontificate of stability, of listening, of measured steps to bridge the Church's deepening divides. Commentators speculated he would spend his early months studying, consulting, and avoiding bold moves that might alienate either the progressive or traditionalist wings of a fractured faithful. Instead, he chose disruption, not with a manifesto or a media blitz, but with a single, deliberate act. No speech, no explanatory video, no attempt to soften the blow. Just a decision that made his vision for the Church suddenly, undeniably real. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misstep. It was a signal. And in the Vatican, signals don't just inform, they reshape. They ripple through offices, dioceses, and entire nations, carrying implications that unfold over years, even decades. Sister Titiana herself is no stranger to the Church's inner workings, though her name was unknown to most until that fateful bulletin. A scholar with a doctorate in canon law from the prestigious Pontifical Lateran University, she spent decades in the quiet service that defines her Franciscan sisters of the poor hospitals, shelters, clinics, places where suffering is met with presence, not headlines. She's no rebel pushing an agenda, no media darling seeking the spotlight. She's a paradox, a woman of deep Franciscan humility, vowed to poverty, yet fluent in the Church's legal and spiritual governance. A nun who often forgoes the traditional habit, yet radiates a conviction that stops admirers and critics alike. Her appointment isn't just about her, it's about the Pope who chose her, and the questions his choice raises. why her? Why now? Why in a role that oversees the formation of every nun, priest, missionary, and monastic, shaping the Church's future? And perhaps most urgently, what kind of church is Pope Leo trying to build? The Dicastery for Institutes of Consecrated Life and Societies of Apostolic Life, where Sister Titiana now serves as secretary, is no bureaucratic footnote. It's a powerhouse, a lever of control that reaches into the very bones of Catholicism. This is the office that governs the rules, spirit, and discipline of religious life globally. Every monastery, every religious order, every novice's formation answers to its authority. It's where scandals land, where disputes between leaders are resolved, where the template for holiness is set. If a religious community wants to change its mission, open a new house, or adapt its rule of life, this dicastery signs off. If an order faces accusations of abuse, doctrinal deviation, or disobedience, this office investigates, intervenes, and sometimes shuts it down. Its influence shapes not just theology, but the emotional, mental, and spiritual formation of the Church's future shepherds and servants. For centuries, this space was ruled by men, cardinals, bishops, princes of the Church, who often had never lived a day in religious poverty or community life themselves. They were faithful, learned, devoted, but there was a gap, a distance. Religious women, in particular, often felt unseen, unconsulted, their lived experience absent from the decisions that shaped their vows. Now, two women stand at the helm of this dicastery. Sister Simona Brambilla, appointed by Pope Francis in January 2025 as the first woman to lead a Vatican dicastery, broke the initial barrier. Pope Leo's choice of Sister Titiana as her deputy didn't just preserve that precedent, it fortified it, doubled down on it, and sent a message louder than any press conference. This isn't going away. Together, these women wield operational power over the Church's spiritual core, not symbolically or ceremonially, but in matters of governance, formation, discipline, and theology. It's a shift seismic in its silence, a moment that feels both faithful to the Church's teaching and disruptive to its culture. The reaction was immediate and sharply divided. On social media, progressive Catholics celebrated it as a triumph of feminine wisdom, a long overdue recognition of women's contributions to the Church. One Catholic women's network called it a sacred acknowledgement of the gifts women have always brought to the Church's mission. A prominent theologian tweeted, "This is reform done right, faithful to doctrine, disruptive to complacency." But traditionalists saw it differently. To them, it was a crack in the wall, a step toward a feared modernization that could erode the Church's identity. "No habit, no reverence," one commenter wrote. "This is Francis 2.0, but faster," said another. Some went further, connecting the appointment to broader anxieties. This is the soft preparation for women's ordination, first the offices, then the altars. The absence of a traditional habit became a lightning rod, with critics arguing that Sister Titiana's plain attire, a gray sweater, no veil signaled a secularization of religious life. "If she doesn't look like a nun, how can she represent one?" one YouTube comment read. Defenders pushed back. "It's not the habit that makes the vocation, it's the life she lives." A nun on Twitter added, "I don't wear a habit either. My vows aren't less real for it." But the debate over her appearance missed the deeper tension. This wasn't just about a woman in power or the clothes she wears. It was about what kind of church Pope Leo envisions. Is this a continuation of Pope Francis's reforms, an escalation, or something entirely new? Is it about inclusion, accountability, or both? For many Catholics, The real struggle isn't the appointment itself, it's the silence that followed. Pope Leo offered no clarification, no defense, no attempt to frame the narrative. Just the fact of it. A name, a role, and an empty space where explanation might have been. In a church built on symbols and clarity, this ambiguity feels like stepping into fog. Ordinary Catholics, far from the polarized shouting matches online, are left with questions that don't go viral but ache with vulnerability. Is this a sign of the Church listening more deeply or losing itself? Are we evolving or unraveling? Does this strengthen our identity or blur it beyond recognition? For the women who've served in the Church's shadows, nuns, catechists, missionaries, parish workers, the moment is bittersweet. They feel pride that one of their own, someone who understands their sacrifices, now sits at the table where decisions are made. But they also feel unease, a quiet ache. Sister Anne, a retired missionary in her 70s, remembers being told her voice didn't belong on an advisory board. She smiles at the news but says softly, "It would have been nice years ago." Maria, a 29-year-old theology student in Spain, sees it as a victory, but wonders if the backlash will drown out the progress. Angela, a laywoman in Chicago who runs a soup kitchen, hears the news on the radio and mutters, "Some of us never left." These women, thousands of them, in convents, parishes, and missions, have always been the Church's heartbeat, holding it together without recognition. For them, this appointment isn't just a headline, it's a reckoning. Will their quiet, unseen faithfulness still have a place in a church stepping into the spotlight? Or will holiness start to look like management, their vocation redefined into something they don't recognize? This appointment is no gesture. It's a move in a larger plan, one rooted not in politics, but in memory, Pope Leo's memory of a church, where leadership meant service, not status. Before he was pope, before he was a bishop, he was Rob, a young priest in Peru, learning from women like Sister Lucia, a missionary who taught him that holiness is found in washing wounds, not seeking applause. He still quotes her, still carries her lessons. His choice of Sister Titiana reflects that vision. Trust those who serve faithfully, whether they wear the expected robes or not. But this consistency unnerves people. Many expected a cautious pope, a bridge between factions. Instead, they got a leader who doesn't signal his moves, he makes them. And when those moves touch sacred nerves, habits, traditions, hierarchies, they reveal fault lines in the Church, between risk and order, freedom and form. Rumors are already swirling of what's next. Whispers from Vatican insiders suggest more appointments, quiet evaluations of bishops, possible shakeups in other dicasteries like the one for the doctrine of the faith. Pope Leo isn't chasing headlines, he's chasing integrity. His silence isn't empty, it's strategic, leaving room for the Holy Spirit to move, but also for discomfort and discernment. If this is how his pontificate begins, what happens when the stakes are higher? When a doctrinal dispute emerges, a scandal breaks, or the Church must define itself in history? Will he remain this steady, or will the weight of Peter's seat force a shift? The deeper question isn't about Sister Titiana's qualifications or even her habit. It's about what this moment reveals about Pope Leo and the Church he's shaping. Is he pulling the Church forward into a new era, or back to an older, simpler spirit, one where leadership was measured by holiness, not hierarchy? Is he reforming or remembering? For Catholics caught in the middle, not the loud traditionalists or progressives, but the quiet faithful in the pews, this moment feels like both a breath of fresh air and a warning. They're tired of division, of not knowing what to feel. They want clarity, not confusion, but what they're getting is a pope who doesn't posture or placate. He prays, he listens, and he acts. This story isn't about one woman or one role. It's about a vision unfolding, one that may redefine not just who leads, but how leadership is lived. It's about a church that might look different, feel different, teach differently. And it's about a question that echoes beyond Rome, into parishes and convents worldwide. Are we ready? Ready for a church that doesn't fit neatly into our categories? For decisions that reflect not agendas, but truths long buried under bureaucracy? Ready for a pope who doesn't play sides, but lifts up those who've been quiet for too long? Because this wasn't a political move, it was a spiritual marker. A reminder that the Holy Spirit isn't static, and neither is Pope Leo. The next steps are coming: more names, more shifts, more ripples. The second move could change everything. Don't look away now. The story has only just begun.